Hello everyone, this is a supplemental video to the first lecture talking about Blender and your sort of first modeling assignment. We went over some basic tools in the last video, and based on some questions I got, I wanted to show a couple of extra things that I think will make the assignment a little bit easier and maybe give you an opportunity to go a little bit above and beyond. So the first thing I wanted to show is joining multiple objects. So when you're modeling, sometimes you might want to model something that it has separate components to it. That's not just one solid piece. It is perfectly acceptable to model things in components. So for example, if you have an object that has a sort of cube-like profile to it, and you wanted to add, like maybe it has a cap, and the cap is a cylindrical. Let's see, I'm just gonna put the settings in here. Go, and the cap has sort of like a cylindrical shape to it. Like maybe you might want to model it with different components, and then you might want to join them together. So in that case, you just select both objects. If you hold shift, you can select both objects like that, and then you would do Control J. One thing to remember is the object that is highlighted in light orange is the kind of like focused object. So whatever, when you do Control J for join, whatever object is the light orange will sort of be the parent, and it'll inherit the origin point of that object. So that's, really easy way to join objects. You can also use the collection here. So the scene collection is just, everything in your scene. So here I have my objects here. And I actually recommend like Boodle bottle. I actually recommend naming these as you go so that you kind of get used to, naming objects. When you make complicated scenes, you're going to end up with like dozens of objects, and they're all going to be like cylinder, cube, um, you know, sphere, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So it's good to name your objects. You can select things here too by selecting the thing in your scene. And so here the last thing you select will be the focus object. And here, the first thing you select is the focus object, which is a little bit different, but you can tell it's light orange versus dark orange. So you can select those there and then Control J to join. If you want to separate an object, you can do that in edit mode. You just select the chunk you want to separate. So for example, if I want to separate the top, a shortcut is if you hover over and tap L, it's called select linked, and it selects everything linked in a particular attribute. So for example, seam means everything that's like one solid chunk that's not like welded into the model. So I guess like an element or whatever, it'll select it. You could also do UVs, sharp, material. So once we get later into the semester, you'll be making object with multiple materials, and you can select that way as well. Anyway, so I have the cap selected. You can also do it manually if you want, but this is faster. And then just tap P and separate by selection, and now this is separate. So now we have two separate objects again. The other thing is your separated object will adopt the name of the previous one, as you can see, and then also it keeps the old origin point. So speaking of, sometimes you might want to change your origin point. So if I want to rotate the cab, you can see it rotates around the origin. You can change how your object rotates if you go up here to the transform orientation or the transform pivot point. So if I do like bounding box center, will that, no, hold on, local. So if you do want to rotate it sort of like, and you can do that here in sort of the component level. Um, Let me hang on a second. Let me just kind of move this and switch it to 3D cursor. Yeah, so that's rotating around the 3D cursor. So the 3D cursor is this thing here, which I can show you how to use in just a second. Individual origins, is that? Yeah, I guess it just kind of uses it. But anyway, so let's say that you want to rotate this individually. Like I said, you could do it in a component. A lot of times you want the pivot point to be somewhere that makes sense, especially if you're modeling for like games or animation. Games, especially when you're exporting, your object will have this pivot. So like if you were to make a chair for a game engine and you model it, you would want the pivot to be at the bottom. So when you put it into the game, the pivot bottom is like where it's on the floor. There's other reasons why too as well. So one way you can do that. Also in the collection, if you click a little eye, you can hide stuff. You can move the individual component to the origin. So the origin is that little orange dot. If I move the polys to the origin, now the origin is at the bottom. So that's one way to do it. Sometimes you might want an origin to be on a specific part of the model. So this is a plane. And let's say I want the origin to be on this particular pivot point. That's usually handy for if you want to rotate around this point, or if you have like a door and you want the door to open from that hinge. In that case, you can put the 3D cursor there and then move the pivot to the 3D cursor. So the 3D cursor is something kind of unique to Blender, and you can move it around by shift right clicking. And it's just kind of an extra reference point inside of 3D space that is useful sometimes. Like for example, when I was rotating around it, you can use it as a reference, like a temporary origin point or a reference point. If you do Shift S on the keyboard, you have the cursor options here. So you could do cursor to world origin, which will reset it back to the middle. I can select this vertice and do Shift S and do cursor to selected. Oh, hang on. Oh, it is there. Okay, sorry. So yeah, so cursor to selected. And then if I go to object mode, I can set origin. I can set origin to 3D cursor. And that'll put the origin on 3D cursor. So now the origin for this plane is there, which can be handy. So that's pivot and origin. Let me delete this. And actually, I don't need that thing. I'm going to make a cylinder. And I wanted to show some more kind of smoothing stuff. Also, by default, when you create an object, it's going to create the object at the 3D cursor by default. So anytime, you can change that setting, but that's the default setting, which is fine. If you tap N on the keyboard, gives you all of these transform values for your object. So if I put these on 0, it will put the object back in the center. But yeah, so smoothing. Let me go to edge mode here and add a couple of edge loops in there, and maybe do a bevel. Let's do a bevel for the top edge, a bevel for the bottom edge. And I'm selecting the whole edge loop at once by holding Alt and clicking. So you have this model. A lot of times you probably want like a smooth result. So you want the model to appear smooth instead of kind of faceted like this. So there's a couple different ways to do it. If you right click and do shade smooth, then it'll shade everything automatically like this and just kind of give it like a overall shading. Since I have a bevel here, the way the shading works is it takes the direction the polygon is, or face is facing, the polygon is facing, and then it sort of blends between the angles of like these polygons here. and gives you like a nice result, a nice like gradient of shading, if that makes sense. Um, Sometimes things aren't always sort of set up that way. So for example, if you wanted to make a hard edge here, like maybe there's some sort of separation. If you select that loop, right click and do sharp, mark sharp, then you can mark that as a sharp edge. Ooh, I think I have to do that. Let's see, select my model, go to normals, auto smooth, and in auto smooth, you can use that. So auto smooth will automatically smooth your model based on an angle. So anything that is under 30 will be blended. Anything that or over will be soft. So if I crank this up to like 60, you can see it smooths everything 60 degrees and under, and then I still have that sharp edge there. You can also take it off. So right click, clear sharp. It's still sharp, I think, because of the angle, but then let's increase that if we can get it. There we go. Get it soft. So everything is soft again. Select these two edges, Shift Alt, and then do mark sharp. So now those edges are sharp. So you get that like nice sort of like separation. Sometimes that's a good way to add detail without adding like extra geometry if you don't need to. Right click, mark sharp. So you can add some details just by using sharp and auto smooth here in the normals menu. So this is the data, object data, normals, auto smooth, and you can change the angle of where it automatically smooths the polygons. And I think that's about it. So those are a couple of extra things I wanted to show you in addition to the basic modeling tools to kind of help you do maybe some things that are a little more interesting. You can do some shading to make things look cool. It's like a kind of an extra way to add some detail. Again, just I don't know if I mentioned this in the previous video, but just make sure you name your objects, whatever you think they should be named. And for the first assignment, when you're modeling your 10 objects, just have them all be in the same Blender file with different names. And I think you should be good to go. All right, so this is just a quick video showing some extra stuff. Hopefully it's helpful.